Feathers. Chapter 8. Sean could do 3 things real well. He could play basketball, he could do math, and he could season chicken. Once he tried to show me how to do the chickens, but mine came out tasting salty and bitter. "You gonna help or what?" Sean said. He was chopping up carrots and onions. "I said I would, right?" "Well, don't touch any spices," he said, pointing to the spice shelf, giving me a look. "Especially the salt. You can put these in those bowls. I'm going to cook them with the broccoli." I put the carrots and onions in the bowls he'd put on the table. Broccoli's only good with cheese. He opened the refrigerator and stood there smelling different packages, trying to figure out what to cook and what had gone bad. "You'd put cheese on everything if you could." He threw a package into the garbage can and took out some chopped meat. "Burgers and vegetables." "And rice," I said. "I can make rice. It's easy." Sean looked at me. "When you make it, it's like oatmeal. Rice should be all separate. Yours is all sticky." "No, it's not. You're just mad because I make it better than you." "You're dreaming," Sean said, but he reached up in the cabinet and handed me the box of rice. "Don't put a whole lot of salt in it, and make sure you put a little butter in the water." I didn't say anything. He knew I was the better rice maker. Sean started shaping the meat into patties. He took a pan out of the oven and put a little oil in it. "You think Mama's going to be okay, Sean?" I asked after a few minutes had passed. He nodded and watched me put the rice and water in a pot. 2 cups of water, he said. 1.5. That's how Mama does it. I put a little more than Mama, but less than what Sean was saying. Then I put some salt and a little bit of butter in the pot and waited for it to boil. Sean reached over me and stirred it. "If you don't stir it before it starts boiling, it sticks." "Yours sticks. My rice is always perfect." I heard the front door close. "Daddy's home," I signed, leaving Sean standing there, stirring my rice. Daddy stood in the long hall leading into our apartment, grinning and holding flowers. Everyone said I was going to be tall like him one day, but it wasn't the tallness I wanted. I wanted his laugh, all loud and silly, and his smile that came into the room a full minute before he did. And I want his pretty eyes, the ones Sean got, and his dark, pretty skin that Mama swore I had. But my skin always looked to me like I didn't know what shade it wanted to be, dark in some places, lighter in other spots. Daddy stepped out of his shoes and took his wet coat off at the same time. I ran down the hall and jumped into his arms, my leg dangling almost to the floor, Sean right behind me. Daddy laughed, walking into the apartment with both of us hanging on to him. "I guess I need to go away more often," he said, signing at the same time. Sean grinned and shook his head. Daddy drove a truck for Interstate Moving and had been away since Wednesday, moving some family stuff to Indiana. Now it was Friday. His goneness felt like forever sometimes. "You need a job that doesn't make you go away," Sean sighed. "Where's my woman?" Daddy said loud. He shook us off of him and did his caveman walk into the living room. "I'm hungry and I'm tired, and why can't this man smell something good cooking?" "Mama's resting," I said. Sean looked at me. He sighed. "I'm cooking. Mama's not feeling well," and Daddy's smiles dropped off his face. He dumped the flowers onto the coffee table and headed to Mama's room. I picked up the flowers. They were pretty. Yellow and red and white with green leaves bunched around them. "Hey, big brother, what kind are these?" I held the flowers toward him. "Lily." He finger-spelled the word for me. "And roses. The red and white one are roses." "You know that," he signed. He must be payday. Flowers cost a lot in the winter time." When I have a daughter, I signed, her name will be Lily Rose. Sean made a face and headed back into the kitchen. I followed him. Your rice is boiling. I turned the fire down underneath the pot and covered it. Sean got the jar that Mama used for flowers down from the shelf. I filled it with water and put the flowers in slowly. Sean pulled down plates and took forks out of the drawer. He put 4 glasses on the kitchen table. We didn't have a dining room, but our kitchen was big enough for 4 people to move around in. Then, without saying anything, he put the burgers on, washed his hand, put some oil in another pan, and started cooking the carrots. What about the onions and broccoli? I said. And cheese. Sean took a deep breath. Carrots take the longest, so you'll have to cook them first, then onions, then broccoli, then a tiny bit of salt. Not a whole lot like you think everything needs. He stirred the carrots, then covered them. The only sound was the sound of things frying. Sean watched me take a red rose and move it closer to a white one. Then I thought for a minute and put a lily, some of the green leaves between the two. He turned back to the stove, flipped the burgers, and tore a paper bag in half and put a big piece of it on a plate. Then he added the onions to the carrots, stirred and covered the pan again. He went back over to the refrigerator and opened it. Then just stood there staring inside. He had ears like Mama, small and perfect shaped. When he was born, the doctors had wanted to do some new kind of operation to fix the inside of them. But Mama and Daddy said no. Nobody's experimenting on my child, Mama said. If that's the way he came into the world, that's the way he's staying. It's us we need to change. And she and Daddy started learning sign language. By the time I was born, Sean was 2.5 years old. I grew up learning how to speak and sign. Sometimes, when he walked past her, Mama just grabbed him and kissed his ears. Sean always laughed, but he pushed her away at the same time. I wondered if he was staring into the refrigerator thinking about that. Years later, when I asked Mama why they didn't just get the operation, she said because it was dangerous and not guaranteed. And most of all, she said, signing at the same time, there's nothing wrong about being deaf. It's just another language. So now you're bilingual, Mama said. That's a gift. That was the first and last time anybody said anything about me being gifted. I waved my hand at Sean to get his attention. He liked that more than somebody coming up and touching him. The ocean, I signed. Sean shrugged. Water, he signed. Water and air. It sounds the way air feels on your face on a windy day. He took some ketchup out of the refrigerator and 1 slice of cheese. Here, he signed, putting the cheese down on one of the plates. That's where you sit. Yellow, he signed. That's a hard one, Sean. Yellow doesn't have a sound. Nothing has a sound to me. That's how this game got started. Yellow. We'd been playing this game since we were real little. One person gave the word and the other person had to describe it, to make the person feel it someplace inside of themselves, to make the person hear it. Sean was better at the game than me, but I still loved playing. Like something soft, I signed, a pillow, or yellow sounds like bubbles, feel. Lots of them in a bathtub. Sean nodded. Then he turned the fire off beneath the burgers and put each of them on the plate with the paper bag. I watched the bag get dark from the boil. He stirred the onions again, added some spices, a little bit of butter, and the broccoli. Then stirred it once more, added some water, turned the heat down beneath it, and covered the pan. Music, I said. What kind? He looked at my rice, then raised his eyebrows. I turned it off, but didn't lift the top. Perfect, I said. A guitar. Sean thought for a minute. Like rain, he said, coming down real soft when it's warm out, and you only get a little wet but not cold. That's kind of rain. I smiled. That's exactly what it made me feel like when I heard a guitar playing softly. Daddy came out of the bedroom. We watched his face. His eyebrows twitched. You had to look hard to see it. Let her rest a bit, he said finally. Dinner's ready? Smells good in here. For a while, we ate without doing much talking. I watched the cheese melt on my burger, then poured ketchup over everything. Stirred my rice until it turned pink. We listened for Mama to come out of her room, but she didn't. Anything interesting happened at school this week? Daddy asked. He took a bite of his vegetables and smiled at Sean. Me and Sean both shook our heads. Nothing interesting happened with work either, Dad said softly. The road from here to Indiana is flat as my feet. Every now and then a bright green road sign pops up to keep you awake. Is Indiana pretty? I asked. Daddy thought for a minute. Pretty late when the sun's coming up. But what place ain't pretty at the beginning and the day? Where's the prettiest place you ever been, Daddy? Daddy grinned. I guess California. Took me a long time to drive there, but when I got there, I went straight to the ocean. It was almost night when I pulled the truck up to where I could see the water. He closed his eyes for a minute, all those different colors spilling over everything. Then he opened his eyes and looked at me and Sean. And here, he said. Sean watched his lips. When Daddy finished speaking, Sean kept on watching them. After a while, Daddy got up from the table, scraped the food off his plate, and put the plate in the sink. I watched Sean watch Daddy. Sometimes he just stared, and it was like his eyes were trying to do everything. Speak and hear and smell and touch. Maybe that's why they were so beautiful. They had all the senses right there in them, showing through. There's another one coming, Daddy sighed. Another baby. He smiled a kind of laugh smile, like he was just as surprised as we were by what he was hearing. What? Another baby, Daddy said again. That's crazy. Mama's too old. We're all too old. What's anybody in this house gonna do with a baby? Sean smiled, like it was all slowing, sinking in, and he liked what was becoming clear or something. A baby, he sighed. Wow. He leaned back in his chair and stared out the kitchen window. Snow was still coming down hard. A baby, he sighed again. I ran my fork through my rice, feeling all kinds of stupid feelings. I was a baby who had made it. It was sad, but each time one of those other babies didn't make it, it seemed clear to me that I was the one who was supposed to be the baby in the family. I don't know why she has to be so tired about it all, I said. Doesn't make any sense. I didn't say what I really wanted to say. What if you and Mama come home crying again? I wanted to ask. What if we think a baby's coming but it doesn't come all the way? Daddy looked at me. Because you're right, Franny. She is old. And that makes it harder to be pregnant. But he shook his head and didn't finish what he was going to say. After a few minutes passed, he sighed, so let her get some rest and try to grow you all a brother or sister. I shrugged. Even if it's a girl, I'm not sharing my room. That's for sure. Daddy ignored me. Sean, you wash tonight, he signed. Franny, you dry and wipe everything down. I don't want to wash, Sean glared at Daddy. I always have to wash. Because you always get them clean, Daddy said. Franny, you wash the dishes then. I shrugged. I didn't mind washing. The warm water felt good in the winter time, and the bubbles were fun to squeeze through my hands. Forget it, Sean sighed. She doesn't know how to do it. We'll be eating hamburgers and rice off our plates for a week. I'll wash. Daddy put his hands up. Ain't that where we started? He said. Come say good night to your mama before you go to bed, you hear. Me and Sean nodded. Then Sean got up and started in on the dishes. Somewhere in another apartment, somebody was playing music, the same song over and over again. It never felt right to be hearing the song and not have Sean hearing it too. I knew he had his own music going inside his head. Music I'd never be able to hear, and maybe that made him sad. But still, sometimes when I heard music, even if Sean was right next to me, I missed him. I got up and took my plate over to the sink. Me and Sean didn't even look at each other, but I bumped him with my shoulder on purpose, and he bumped me right back. For some strange reason, it was enough for both of us just to be standing side by side. Chapter 9. Feathers by Jacqueline Woodson. This recording is by Jamie from Seoul, Korea. Mama stayed in bed on Saturday, only getting up to go to the bathroom and to stop me from yelling at John for changing the television channel in the middle of my favorite cartoons. It was almost noon when she came into the living room. There were bags under her eyes, and when she signed to Sean, her hands moved slower than usual. Sean was in a stupid mood and needed to be fighting with somebody. She's been watching it all morning, he said. I just watched. Mama put her hand up. You two need to figure it out. Forget it. Let him watch whatever he wants. I don't care. I gotta clean the stupid bathroom anyway. I was talking with my back to Sean so that he couldn't see my lips. He hated when I did that, but I didn't care. I stomped down the hall and started pulling the cleaning supplies out of the hallway closet. I hated seeing Mama looking all tired and messy. It wasn't fair. Let Sean watch whatever he wanted. It didn't matter to me. I just wanted her to go back to bed and come out of her room looking better. Sean was so stupid sometimes. He acted like he didn't even care. After a little while, I heard him flick the television off, head to his room, and slam the door. The apartment got quiet, and the quiet felt like something hot and sticky all over me. Something scary and all blurred up. I leaned over the edge of the tub to scrub it. Snow had piled up outside the bathroom window, and the sky was silvery gray, like something heavy was pushing down on the clouds. For some reason, the Jesus boy came into my mind. I wondered where he lived, what he was doing. I wondered if he had a window to stare out of and watch snow coming down. When I tried to picture his face, all I saw was the broken up look he had had that afternoon. I tried to think about the real Jesus, the one Samantha knew so well. All I kept seeing was hands, though hands and feet with scars on them. While I was scrubbing, the sun came out, watery and cold-looking. I sat on the edge of the tub with my sponge in one hand and the can of Comet in the other. Just sat there like that, watching the sky until the sun faded back behind the clouds again. After I finished cleaning the bathroom, me and Daddy went grocery shopping. We got onto the elevator and Daddy took my hand. I knew I was too big for that, but I let him take it anyway. When the elevator started moving again, I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "What is going on, Star?" he asked. His voice sounded strange in the closed elevator. Sometimes I forgot how quiet it was inside our house with all that signing going on and all. I shrugged. "You worrying, aren't you?" "Aren't you?" I looked up at him. His eyes were red and puffy, and he hadn't shaved. "Those other babies," I said slowly. They died. Mama grew them for a while, and then they were all gone again." Daddy pulled me closer to him. "Here's the deal," he said. The elevator door opened, and we walked out into the lobby past the weekend doorman. The lobby had mirrors and pretty tile floors and a fake fireplace with an electric log in it. "You don't need to worry about what happened before. All you need to look at is what's happening now." He nudged my chin up so I would look at him. "And be happy about it. And if it means you only get to be happy for a month or 2 months or 3 months, so what? A month or 2 months or 3 months is a good long time." I kept looking up at him. My head felt like it was all swirly inside. Felt like if somebody lifted the ground out from beneath me, I'd just float off somewhere. I shivered, took my hand out of Daddy's and shoved it in my pocket. When I was a little girl, Sean would stand over me and sing songs. When my brother danced, it was like nothing else mattered anywhere. He danced and sang like there was music all around him all the time. Some days, I wished I could hear that music. And some days I wish I could climb inside all the quiet and stillness inside Sean's head, curl up there and rest for a while. Daddy opened the car door and I climbed into the back. He always promised me I would be able to sit up front next year. Every year was next year. He got in on the driver's side and started the car. It was an old car and needed a few minutes to warm up. "This tiredness could just be," Daddy said, "that your mama's been working too hard and you kids been wearing her out." I finished for him, rolling my eyes. "With all the wearing out of my mama, she and Daddy said we did. You'd think she'd be completely see-through by now, like the old pieces of cotton sheets we used to doth with." I stared out the window. "My grandmother always says that good things come in ones and twos and threes, and bad things come however they can get here." I tried to close my eyes and picture the place where all the tiredness was coming from, the place where the baby was growing and wearing Mama out. I wanted to lift the tiredness up out of Mama with my thinking. I wanted powers like that. If I could walk through the world and just touch people and lift their pains right out of their bodies, I'd never stop walking. I looked down at the palms of my palms. They were starting to itch. "What you thinking about, Sweet Pea?" Daddy asked. "Nothing," I said. I kept staring out the window, silently scratching my palms. Chapter 10. Feathers by Jacqueline Woodson. This recording is by Jamie from Seoul, Korea. I asked Daddy to drop me off at the rec center after we finished grocery shopping. I wanted to watch Sean playing ball. "You going there to play some games, or are you going there to bother your brother?" Daddy asked, pulling up in front of the gray building kids went to after school sometimes and on weekends. The building always smelled sweaty, and the sound of kids running around the gym and game room echoed all over the place, then got all muffled like the noises were drowning in their own sound. "He won't care," I said. Once he got used to the idea that he'd have to walk home with me, I figured he'd just have to accept it. It's not like I followed him around that much. Daddy rolled his window down and I leaned in and kissed him on the cheek. "You two be careful," he said, rolling up the window real fast so the snow wouldn't blow in. I shivered, pulled my hat down over my ears, and ran inside. The minute Sean saw me, he frowned. Two of the guys he was playing with were deaf, and one of them signed, "Babysitting time." Sean signed a curse back, one that a lot of hearing people knew. He chucked the ball to another guy and took a timeout, coming over to me. He was wearing a pair of old blue shorts and a t-shirt that had his cartoon guy walking down the street in a long robe. Underneath the guy, it said, "Keep on trucking." The shirt used to belong to Daddy, but somehow Sean had inherited it. There was a big, dark patch of sweat under his collar. "What are you doing here?" he asked. I shrugged. There wasn't anything to do at home. Sean looked at me. One of the guys was waving for him to come on, and Sean signed for him to wait. "Can't you see he's talking?" I said, and Sean gave me a look. "Sit down," he said. "I'm almost done." He tapped me on the head and ran back over to his game. He tapped on the head. The tap on the head meant he wasn't mad at me for coming. I climbed on the bleachers and sat down in front of some girls who were watching the game. "That's your brother?" one of them asked me. I looked at her and nodded, then turned back front. "He can't hear anything?" I heard her asking my back. I knew what was coming, so I didn't turn around again. "Nope." "Dag," she said. "That messed up," I heard another girl say. "And he's a fine brother man, too." I rolled my eyes and felt my hands clenching inside my coat pockets. No wonder he's not trying to talk to us. I wanted to say, "He's not trying to talk to you because he's not interested in you," but I didn't say anything. What was the use? Instead, I watched Sean and his friends play full court. Sean took a shot and missed, then looked over at me and shrugged. Then he looked at the girls behind me and ducked his head a bit before taking off down the court. "Those other two guys are deaf too," another one of the girls said. "Yeah, but they're not cute as her brother." There were 3 hearing guys playing against Sean and his friends. From the looks of it, the hearing guys were winning. I didn't want to see that. Not with those dumb girls behind me. Not with the deaf guys trying so hard and all. I got up after a few more minutes and signed to Sean that I'd meet him in the hallway. He nodded and I left the gym. Kids were running around and there were a few grown-ups trying to get them to use walking feet. I leaned against the wall watching it all. There was a poster across from me listing all the rules of the rec center. Next to each rule, instead of a number, there was a big yellow smiley face. Next to the rule that said no gravity, somebody had magic marker their names and a frowning face. I was smiling over that when I saw the Jesus boy coming out of the boys' locker room, zipping up his coat, his hair wet and curling over his shoulders. I stopped smiling. Maybe he felt me staring because he looked up suddenly. I just kept staring at him. "Hey," he said when he got a little bit closer. "Hey yourself." "What are you doing here, Franny?" It felt strange to hear him say my name. It's a free country. He moved a little bit closer to me. "That's what they say." He signed the word, "say." "How come you know sign anyway?" The Jesus boy stopped smiling, thought for a minute, then shrugged. "I don't know," he said slowly. like he was really trying to understand. That doesn't make any sense. I just know it, he said. I just do. Maybe from when I was a baby or something. Well, it's not something a person's born knowing, I said. Well, how come you know English? Because my family knows English, and that's what they taught me. Jesus Boy shrugged again. So maybe it's the same for me. Maybe somebody in my family knew it one time. I shook my head. That doesn't make even a little bit of sense. Does to me, he said. Do they sign now? He made the sign for maybe and smiled at me. I signed back, maybe you're crazy. Well, what made you sign to me the other day, I asked. I saw you walking with that guy who signs. You two were talking to each other. That's my brother, he said. Sean. Yeah, Jesus Boy said. It was kind of far away when I saw you, but you'll look like. No, you don't, I said. Sean was beautiful. Everybody could see that. I was just regular. We just sort of stood there for a while, watching people go by. I'm waiting for my dad, Jesus Boy said. Maybe I should be waiting outside. Well, goodbye then, I said. The Jesus Boy looked at me sideways but didn't move. You really lived across the highway? I asked. Jesus Boy nodded. Well, what was that like, to live over there? It would have been okay for me, but it wasn't okay for my mom and dad, he said. It was hard for them. People can be so stupid. Once this cop stopped us and asked me if I knew my dad. Me and my dad were fooling around, kind of wrestling and stuff. He thought my dad was hurting me. He looked at me, then said, I don't look like him, I guess. How come? He stared at the poster with the smiley faces. Just 'cause. It doesn't really matter. I used to wish that I would wake up and look just like him. I still do sometimes. I looked at him and he's so cool and he stopped. I watched him, waiting for him to say something more, but he didn't. Just put his hands in his pockets and stood there. Two little kids ran by us but slowed down to stare at him, at us. Take a picture, I said. It lasts longer. The little girl stuck her tongue out at me. Then she and her friend ran off. Jesus Boy smiled. His eye teeth were kind of fangy. Someone pulled the rec center door open and a group of boys came and making a lot of noise. I could see Trevor in the middle of them, his coat hanging off the arm that had the cast on it. When he saw us, he stopped. If it ain't Mr. and Mrs. Jesus, he said. The other guys with him looked at us. One of them laughed. You still here? The Jesus Boy looked at him. I'm still here. One of the guys said, Come on, Trav, as they started walking away. Trevor told them to go ahead. He'd catch up. You know I don't even like you, Trevor said. You don't even know me, man. I ain't your man, white boy. The Jesus Boy looked at him calmly and said, Well, I ain't your white boy, man. We could take this outside, Trevor said. You go ahead, the Jesus Boy said. I'll meet you there. Trevor looked at him, his blue eyes getting smaller and more evil. I wanted to ask him what he planned to do with his arm in a cast and all, but then the door opened and a tall, dark-skinned man came in, looked around, then saw us. You ready? He said to the Jesus Boy. The Jesus Boy nodded. This is Franny. Franny, this is my pops. That's Trevor. I felt my eyebrows lifting up and tried to make them go down again. Hey, Franny. I managed to say hello, but Trevor just stood there a moment staring at the man. Then, without saying anything else, he turned and took off down the hall. The little girls were back, staring at all three of us now. Let's get moving, Jesus Boy's dad said. We got things to do. As they were leaving, I heard him ask the Jesus Boy how his swim was. I couldn't hear the answer. Is that white boy your boyfriend? One of the little girls asked. I had forgotten they were standing there. Oh, scat out of here already, I said, waving my hands at them. They squealed and ran off again. But later on, when Sean came out of the gym all sweaty and pulling on his coat, I was still thinking about the Jesus boy and his daddy. You're always following me, Sean signed. You like it, I signed back. How come you didn't watch the whole game? We went crazy on those guys. They didn't know what was happening to them once we got warmed up. You missed my winning shot. He took a jump shot, throwing his basketball into the air and catching it. I thought about the stupid girls in the bleachers, then brushed the thought out of my head. It got too hot in there, I signed, and sticky. Sean laughed and chucked me on the head again. Down the hall, I could see Trevor and his friends standing around in a circle. I heard the guard telling them to get out of the hallway and saw Trevor give the guard a mean look. You can get out of my hallway or you can leave, the guard said. Let's go play some pinball, one of the boys said, and the others followed him down the hall to the game room. Come on, Lefty, he said, looking at Trevor. Let's see what you got with that one good hand. Trevor smiled, and his face looked almost normal, soft and happy. Isn't that kid in your class? Sean asked. I nodded. How come you didn't go hang with him then? I watched Trevor move down the hall with his friends. I don't like him. Beggars can't be choosy, Sean said, smiling and tapping my head again. I know, I said. That's why I'm stuck with you. And as we walked out into the snow, I lifted my head up to catch flakes on my tongue, feeling them melting in my mouth and somehow warming me. Chapter 11. Feathers by Jacqueline Woodson. This recording is by Jimmy from Seoul, Korea. Late in the afternoon, I was sitting with Sean on the couch, eating pretzels and cheese. We weren't allowed to eat sugar when the weather was real bad because Mama said it made us too crazy with all the running around and jumping up and down we did. But Sean had picked up a Hershey bar on the way home and we'd split it and stuff it into our mouths before we got on the elevator. I felt like I'd bounce off the ceiling and ricochet all over the apartment if the snow didn't stop. The weather guy had said this was a record, that it hadn't snowed this much since way back in the 50s. I turned on the radio and the Jackson 5 were singing ABC. I was in love with Michael Jackson. He was one of the cutest boys on the planet as far as I knew. I got off the couch and started dancing to the song. Mama had gotten me a rainbow peasant skirt for Christmas, and when I twirled in it, the colors seemed to spread light all over the room. Sean shook his head watching me. He sighed, One of these days, I'm gonna teach you some rhythm. When the music was loud enough, Sean could feel the rhythm through the vibration. When he danced, you wouldn't even know he was deaf. But he was too busy stuffing pretzels in his mouth and making fun of me to get up off the couch and move around. The music was so loud I didn't even hear Grandma come in until she was standing right near me, telling me to turn it down. Sean jumped off the couch and hugged her. I nearly jumped into her arms. If you all don't get off me and let me get my coat off, somebody's gonna feel my Bible, Grandma said. I heard that music down the street, but she was smiling as she turned the radio off. Is it still real cold out? Sean signed. It was freezing earlier. He said, Is it cold? I know a little something, Grandma said, cutting me off. She nodded at Sean. She always said she was too old to learn another language by the time Sean came along, But most times when I tried to translate, she already knew what Sean was signing. And she had a way of signing back that only her and Sean understood most of the times, a kind of secret language that just about burned me up. She bent down to kiss me, and I took her face in my hands and kissed her nose. She laughed and pushed me away the way she always did. She only had 2 wrinkles, one running straight across her forehead and one small one just at the top of her nose between her eyes. She didn't have any gray hair like other grandmothers, but Mama said it was hidden underneath ears and ears of blue-black hair dye. I liked the color, though. The way the blue kind of caught you by surprise. I took her hand and pulled her over to the couch. Sean had the other hand.